The first thing Liam noticed was the smell. Not the chlorine tang of a summer day, but something cloyingly sweet, a scent that hung in the humid air like a physical weight. It was the smell of 1,000,000 wildflowers distilled into one sickly rich syrup. He stepped out onto the patio, phone in hand, and stopped dead. The pool was no longer blue. It was a swirling viscous gold, thick as corn syrup. The sunlight caught it, refracting into 1,000 shimmering amber diamonds. At the shallow end, a small, dark cloud swarmed, a living, buzzing shroud over the sweet surface. Bees, a biblical plague of them, feasting. "Liam, what is it?" Chloe's voice was bright and cheerful from the kitchen, a stark contrast to the bizarre horror show outside. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His brain was struggling to process the impossible sight. 1,000 gallons of honey water. How? Why? Chloe came to the sliding glass door, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her smile vanished the moment she saw it. "Oh my God, is that honey?" "It can't be," Liam muttered, stepping closer. A low, continuous hum vibrated the air around him. He knelt, dipping a finger into the thick liquid. It was warm and sticky. It smelled overwhelmingly of floral nectar. He pulled his finger back, a long, syrupy strand dripping from the tip. "It is." "A hive must have broken," Chloe said, her voice laced with a nervous disbelief. "A huge one. Maybe in the old oak tree?" Liam shook his head, his mind already racing past the absurdity of it. A single hive wouldn't produce this much honey. This was deliberate. This was an act of something. He felt a cold dread settle in his stomach, a feeling he hadn't had in decades. He went back inside, grabbed a spray bottle of water, and began frantically trying to wash the honey from his hand. It clung to his skin, a sweet, indelible reminder. He spent the next 2 hours on the phone, a growing knot of frustration tightening in his chest. The first pest control company laughed. The second offered to send a specialist for a non-refundable fee of $5,000. The third, a small local outfit, was quiet when he described the situation. "Sir, I've never heard of anything like that." "A whole pool?" "I'm telling you, it's 100% pure honey substance," Liam said, his voice ragged with exhaustion. There was a long pause on the other end. "I've got a contact for something like this," the man finally said, his voice lower, more serious. "He handles unusual situations. Says he'll be there in 20 minutes. Just 20 minutes? Liam asked, surprised. "What's his name?" "Just calls himself Marcus." A chill, a physical wave of nausea washed over Liam. He sat down hard on a deck chair, the plastic slats digging into his back. The name was a phantom, a whisper from a life he had dismantled and buried piece by piece. Marcus. The last time he had heard that name, he was a different man, a desperate man, standing on a precipice. He had pushed Marcus off that precipice to save himself. Chloe came outside again, a sympathetic frown on her face. "What is it, honey?" "You look like you've seen a ghost." He forced a weak smile. "Just tired of talking to people who think I'm crazy." 20 minutes later, a beat-up, unmarked white van pulled into the driveway. It looked more like a plumber's rig than a beekeeper's. A man got out, a silhouette against the setting sun. He was tall and lean, with the easy, economical movements of a predator. He wore worn jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low. He didn't carry a net or a smoker or any of the usual beekeeping tools. He carried a small, weathered leather bag slung over his shoulder. He walked to the edge of the pool, his gait unhurried. He didn't flinch at the buzzing cloud or the sweet, overpowering scent. He simply stood there, hands on his hips, staring into the golden water as the last rays of sun glinted on his face. Liam's stomach plummeted. It was him. The same sharp-boned face, the same cold, calculating eyes. Only older, harder, with a network of fine lines etched around them. Marcus looked up, his gaze locking with Liam's from across the expanse of the pool. A faint, knowing smile played on his lips. "Didn't think you'd ever get in another sticky situation, did you, Liam?" The words were a direct hit, a torpedo to the life Liam had built. He felt Chloe stiffen beside him. "You know this man?" she whispered, her eyes wide with fear and confusion. We did some business together a long time ago," Liam stammered, his voice a dry rasp. He took a step forward, trying to interpose himself between Chloe and the man who was a living, breathing ghost from his past. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" Marcus didn't answer. He bent down, plucked a solitary bee from the surface of the golden liquid, and crushed it between his thumb and forefinger. He held his hand out, showing the tiny mangled insect to Liam. "This honey, Liam, isn't from a hive. It's from a factory, one of ours. A little tribute, you could say, to what you've got now." He gestured to the sprawling house, the manicured lawn, the expensive patio furniture. "All this is the sweet part of the deal, isn't it? The honey you took for yourself. The honey you left me to drown in." Chloe let out a small gasp. The air thickened with unspoken accusations. Liam's carefully constructed world was cracking open, revealing the rot beneath. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. Marcus's smile widened. It was a terrible, joyless expression. "Don't you?" "It's all there, Liam. Every lie, every betrayal. All you have to do is look for the sweetness. Just like they say, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar." He let the crushed bee fall. "But you know what you really catch with honey, Liam? Bears. Big, angry bears who've been hibernating for 20 years. And I'm hungry. And I've come to collect what's mine." He unzipped the leather bag he carried, pulling out a small metallic device. He set it down on the edge of the pool, and with a soft click, it hummed to life. The humming was different from the bees. It was deeper, more rhythmic, a low vibration that seemed to seep into the ground. "You have a choice, Liam," Marcus said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You can come with me and we'll deal with this the easy way. Or you can stay here and watch your perfect life dissolve piece by piece as this little device gets to work. It's a sonic device, you see. Sends out a signal. The honey is just the attractant." "The signal. Well, let's just say it's calling something a lot bigger than a few bees to the sweetest thing you have." He looked directly at Chloe, then at their daughter's bedroom window on the second floor. Liam's blood ran cold, a terror more potent than any he had ever known. The sweet smell of the honey was suddenly the most terrifying thing in the world. "Choose, Liam," Marcus said, his eyes a chilling void. "Your freedom or theirs?" The device continued to hum, a ticking clock counting down to a nightmare Liam could feel, but couldn't yet see. The low hum of the device was the only sound for a long, agonizing moment. It was a mechanical heartbeat, a bass note of impending doom that vibrated through the deck. Chloe's hand tightened on Liam's arm, her nails digging into his skin. "What is he talking about, Liam? Who is this man?" Liam's eyes never left Marcus's. "Get inside, Chloe, please." His voice was low, raw with a fear she had never heard. "I'm not leaving you," she insisted, her gaze flicking between the two men. "Not until you tell me what's happening." Marcus's cold laugh cut through the tension. "He can't tell you, love. The truth tastes like vinegar, and he's only ever dealt in honey." He took a slow step back, giving Liam a look that was part pity, part predatory satisfaction. "I asked you a question, Liam. This is a time-sensitive offer. Your freedom or theirs?" He glanced pointedly toward their daughter's bedroom window, the humming device between them. The message was clear. The threat was real. The carefully constructed dam of Liam's composure burst. 20 years, Marcus. 20 years I've lived without a single ghost. You can't just walk back in here with a beat-up van and a fairy tale?" Marcus tilted his head, a wry, unsettling smirk on his face. "Fairy tale? Funny. I remember a story about a little pig who built his house of sticks. Looked pretty and strong, didn't it? But all it took was one puff." He made a soft puffing sound with his lips, and a small, almost imperceptible surge of energy pulsed from the device. The hum deepened, and the honey in the pool began to shimmer, the surface rippling with a strange, nervous energy. Liam took a desperate step forward. "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Then you've chosen," Marcus said, his smile disappearing. "You've chosen to stay and watch the wolves come to your door. You always were good at letting someone else take the fall." A fresh wave of terror hit Liam. He didn't know what wolves Marcus was talking about, but the malice in his voice was unmistakable. He needed to get that device away from the pool, away from his family. Without a second thought, he lunged for it. Marcus was faster. He didn't move an inch, but his arm shot out, a blur of motion. He caught Liam's wrist in an iron grip, a grip that belied his lean frame. The pain was immediate and blinding. He twisted Liam's arm with a quiet, sickening efficiency, and Liam cried out as he was spun around and slammed into the side of the house. His head hit the brick with a dull thud. He slid to the ground, his vision swimming, the world a blur of honey and pain. "I wouldn't," Marcus said, his voice now a low growl. "That little toy's more valuable to me than all your pretty lies. You see, it's not just calling them. It's a key to the front door of all your secrets, all your little sins." He bent down, his face inches from Liam's. The scent of him was old money and something burnt. "You stole everything, Liam. You took the score, you left me for dead, and you built this perfect little life on my ashes. But ashes turn to dust, and dust gets in the wind. And sometimes it blows right back to where it came from." Chloe was screaming now. It was a high, terrified sound that cut through the humming. Liam struggled to his feet, holding his throbbing arm. He had to think. He had to do something. "What is it, Marcus? What do you want?" he pleaded, his bravado gone, replaced with a desperate, naked fear. "I told you," Marcus said, gesturing back at the pool. "The honey you took. And the punishment for leaving me to drown in the vinegar." He looked past Liam, his gaze fixed on something beyond the tree line. His expression shifted, a flicker of genuine anticipation crossing his face. "Ah, looks like the first of them is home." A deep, rolling rumble like distant thunder vibrated the ground. It was not a car engine. It was something far bigger, far more primal. The sound wasn't a roar, but a rhythmic, heavy thudding, growing louder with every passing second. The bees, as if sensing a new, larger threat, abandoned the pool and scattered into the air. The golden surface was left in a state of suspended animation, the ripples catching the last light of the day. A massive shadow detached itself from the forest at the edge of the property line. It wasn't a wolf or a bear. It was a man, but a man of impossible size. He was a mountain of muscle, his shoulders so wide they seemed to block out the remaining light. His face was a chiseled mask of scars and rage, and his eyes, when they caught the light, were cold and empty. He was followed by another, and then another, each one a different kind of monster in human form. One was wiry and fast-looking with a knife-scarred face. Another was round and brutal with a head shaved clean. They were Marcus's crew, the men Liam had abandoned 20 years ago. The men he had sold out to a shadowy organization to save his own skin. They weren't criminals anymore. They were something else. They were broken, brutalized things, tools in Marcus's hands. And they were here. The first one, the mountain of a man, walked directly to the edge of the pool. He didn't look at Liam or Chloe. He simply reached down, plunged his enormous hands into the honey water, and with a grunt of effort, began to pull something out. The object was large and heavy, and as he wrestled it free from the thick, viscous liquid, Liam saw what it was. It was a metal briefcase, a large rectangular box with combination locks. A case Liam recognized with a jolt that felt like an electric shock. The case he had promised Marcus he would keep safe. The case that held the key to all their lives and fortunes. The case he had, with a single treacherous act, betrayed them all to keep for himself. "Your honey, Liam," Marcus said, his voice laced with venom as the giant man set the dripping briefcase on the deck. "And you know what the bees bring back to the hive, don't you? What they bring back to the family?" He unzipped the leather bag he had been carrying, pulled out a second, smaller metallic device, and pressed a button. A beam of red light shot from it, bathing the surface of the briefcase in a spectral glow. The locks clicked open with a chorus of small sounds, and the giant man unclasped it, pulling it open. Inside were not diamonds or gold or cash, but something far more valuable. Hundreds of small square wafers, each one inscribed with a unique serial number. Liam's stomach dropped. He had thought it was a lie, a rumor. But it was all there. The prototype chips, the very thing he had betrayed Marcus for. The giant man reached into the case, his fingers closing around a single wafer. He held it up to the light, and Marcus looked at Liam. "This isn't just a chip, Liam. It's a key. The key to the entire operation, to everything you promised you'd protect. You see, the only way to get a bear to come out of hibernation is to offer him his freedom. And you, Liam, You're the one who just brought me my prize. Now let's see what we can do about the debt." The giant man's massive hands closed around the wafer, and with a sickening crunch, he snapped it in half, the sound echoing in the sudden silence as the humming stopped. The nightmare was no longer a promise. It was here, and it was just getting started. The sudden appearance of the little girl on the balcony was a jarring, discordant note in the symphony of violence about to unfold. The bear's massive fist, a sledgehammer of flesh and fury, froze in midair, a dark, motionless pendulum over Liam's head. Marcus, who had been a mask of stone-cold malevolence, let his expression falter. The other two men, the wiry one and the brutal one, glanced up at the small, pajama-clad figure, their own hardened faces showing a flicker of something almost akin to confusion. "Daddy, what are you doing with the funny guys?" The innocent question, delivered in a sleepy, morning, tousled voice, hung in the heavy, honey-scented air. Chloe, her body still coiled with fear and rage, let out a shaky sob of relief. Her gaze was fixed on her daughter, a silent plea to stay back. Liam, however, saw a different opportunity, a sliver of light in the darkness. Marcus had talked about the past, about betrayal and revenge, but he hadn't accounted for the present. The present was a child, a pure, unblemished piece of the life he had so meticulously built. "Go back inside, honey," Liam said, his voice softer than he'd intended. The shift in tone from the desperate man begging for his life was a testament to the power of the moment. He wasn't just a target anymore. He was a father. Marcus's eyes, which had been fixed on the little girl, now dropped back to Liam. There was a flicker of something in them, a ghost of a memory, perhaps. A moral line he hadn't intended to cross. He had planned to terrorize Liam, to take his life and his fortune, but not in front of his child. "This is not part of the deal," Marcus said, his voice low, a gravelly whisper. His face was a contorted mask of conflicting emotions. The wiry man, the one with the knife scars, snorted. "Come on, boss. What's the difference? She saw us." Marcus ignored him. He took a hesitant step toward the house, his gaze still on the balcony. "Get her inside, Liam, now!" But Liam wasn't going to back down. This was his leverage, the one thing Marcus hadn't planned for. He straightened, ignoring the dull ache in his arm. "She stays here, Marcus? You think you're so tough? You think you're so hard? You came here to settle a score. Well, the score's changed. This is my family, my home, and you're not going to terrify my daughter." Marcus's face darkened, the flicker of hesitation replaced by a cold fury. He was a man of plans, of calculations, and this tiny variable was throwing his entire revenge plot into chaos. "Don't push me, Liam. You don't know what I'm capable of." "I do know," Liam said, his voice gaining strength. "I know because I saw it. I saw what you became. And I'm not letting you get away with it again." As he spoke, he moved subtly, inching himself closer to the briefcase on the ground. He wasn't going to grab it. He was going to use it as a tool. He had to think, not with his fists, but with his mind. This was a chess game, not a brawl. The bear, ever the silent guardian, took a half step, but Marcus held up a hand, stopping him. He wanted to deal with Liam himself. "You think this is a game?" Marcus asked, his voice a low hiss. "This isn't about you, Liam. This is about justice. The justice you denied me for 20 years. You think a little girl is going to change that?" Just then, the little girl, emboldened by the silent standoff, started to descend the stairs, her small bare feet patting softly on the wood. Chloe gasped and took a step after her, but it was too late. The girl reached the bottom, her eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and fear. She saw the bees, the golden pool, and the three men who looked nothing like the funny guys her father played with. She walked directly to the bear, who looked down at her with a mix of bewilderment and a kind of primal awkwardness. He was a beast of a man, an instrument of destruction, and she was a tiny, fragile child. He couldn't process it. "You're a giant," she said, her voice full of childish wonder. The bear didn't respond. He simply stared at her, a great, lumbering statue of confusion. She reached out a small, hesitant hand, and with an unbelievable audacity, touched his leg. Marcus's face contorted in a silent scream. "Get her away from him!" He roared, a guttural sound that seemed to come from his soul. The wiry man started forward, but Liam was faster. He darted toward the briefcase, his fingers wrapping around the handle. He didn't lift it. He dragged it, sending the wafers clattering against each other in a cascade of metallic chimes. The bear, startled by the sound and the sudden movement, looked down at Liam, his eyes losing their focus on the child and returning to their cold, menacing glare. Marcus, seeing his entire operation in jeopardy, began to move. But the moment of hesitation, the moment of shock, had been enough. Liam had the briefcase in his hands. He knew what he had to do. He looked at Chloe, at her wide, terrified eyes. "Get her inside," he commanded, his voice tight with purpose. "Now!" He held the briefcase up, the light glinting off the metal. He knew what Marcus wanted. He wanted to destroy the chips, to sell them off one by one, to bleed Liam dry. He wanted revenge, but Liam wasn't going to let him have it. He had a different kind of justice in mind. With a final desperate burst of strength, he swung the briefcase and sent it flying. It arced through the air, a metal projectile, and landed with a great resounding splash in the middle of the honey-filled pool. The viscous liquid swallowed it whole, and a wave of the golden syrup sloshed over the side. A terrible, furious silence descended. The hum of the device was gone. The bees were gone. Only the sweet, heavy smell remained. Marcus stared at the ripples in the honey, his face a perfect picture of frozen rage. The bear stood still and menacing, his entire posture radiating a kind of silent, thunderous fury. "You fool," Marcus finally whispered, his voice shaking with suppressed violence. "You just threw away billions." "No," Liam said, his voice trembling but firm. "I just put it somewhere you can't get it." Marcus took a step forward, his eyes burning with a hellish light. "You think that little bit of honey's going to stop me, Liam?" "No," Liam said, shaking his head. "But it's going to stop the bear. You see, the funny thing about that honey, Marcus, is that it's from a very specific plant, one they call the widowmaker. It's the one thing you can't trust the bees with. The honey itself is a powerful tranquilizer, and that big lug of yours has just spent the last 20 minutes standing in a puddle of it." As if on cue, the bear, who had been a statue of fury, began to sway. His massive eyelids drooped, his knees buckled, and with a great rumbling thud, he collapsed, half in and half out of the pool. The two other men stared, their bravado evaporating, replaced by a raw fear. Liam didn't hesitate. He knew his family wasn't safe, not yet. But he had bought himself a few minutes, and a few minutes was all he needed. He grabbed Chloe and his daughter by the hands, and they began to run, away from the terrifying sight of a giant, sleeping man, away from the hum of a device and the sticky, sweet scent of revenge. But he knew with a gut-wrenching certainty that they weren't running from a nightmare. They were running right into one. Because Marcus, the true mastermind, was still standing, his eyes a cold, unwavering fury, and he was staring not at the pool, but at the place where the briefcase had been. He was staring at Liam, and a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. The sprint felt like a dream, a blur of motion and panicked breath. Liam's hand was a vice around Chloe's, his other clutched his daughter's small, warm one. The back gate was only 50 yards away, 50 yards to safety. But the sound behind them was a visceral, hungry thing, a footfall that was no longer the heavy thud of the tranquilized bear, but the quick, purposeful strides of Marcus and his two men. They were not running. They were hunting. "He's laughing," Chloe gasped, twisting her head to look back. I can hear him laughing, and she was right. The sound was thin and cruel, carried on the sweet, sickly sweet air. It was a sound of absolute victory. Marcus had never needed a fist. His weapon was always the mind, the cold, calculating cruelty of a man who saw the world as a giant chessboard. "We're almost there," Liam yelled, pulling his family along. The fear was a hot, live thing in his throat, but a new emotion was rising to meet it. A cold, hard resolve he hadn't felt in 20 years. He had outsmarted Marcus once before, not with strength, but with a betrayal. Now, he would outsmart him with justice. As they reached the wrought iron gate, he fumbled with the latch, his trembling fingers clumsy with adrenaline. The metal clanged open, and he shoved Chloe and his daughter through, a frantic, desperate act. He was about to follow when Marcus's voice cut through the night, clear and sharp. "You've already lost, Liam. You didn't throw the briefcase away. You put it exactly where I wanted it to be." Liam froze. The blood drained from his face as a horrifying realization washed over him. He turned, and Marcus stood at the edge of the patio, bathed in the gentle glow of the porch light, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph on his face. The wiry man and the brutal man stood on either side, their faces unreadable. "The hum, Liam," Marcus said, gesturing back at the pool. The humming had stopped, but a new sound, a faint clicking, emanated from the honey-filled basin. It was a chilling sound like a stopwatch counting down. That wasn't a call for bees. It was a signal, a very specific signal. And the bear wasn't a problem. He was an accomplice. His fall was part of the plan. The bear, a silent, snoring mountain, began to stir. His massive head moved, and a low grunt rumbled in his chest. His eyes fluttered open, not with the glazed, distant look of a tranquilized man, but with a cold, predatory gleam. He had been faking it. The Widowmaker honey wasn't a tranquilizer. It was a stimulant. "No," Liam whispered, the word a desperate, broken prayer. Marcus's smile was a masterpiece of pure evil. "Yes, Liam. You see, the Widowmaker honey is not a tranquilizer at all. It's an accelerant. It's a powerful, highly volatile substance that, when subjected to the right sonic frequency, becomes a fuse for a bomb. And you, Liam, you so kindly threw my precious briefcase, which, by the way, has a very delicate, very explosive payload, right into the middle of it. The hum wasn't just for the bees. It was a detonation timer. The clicking sound intensified, a frantic drumbeat of impending doom. The honey in the pool began to shimmer and writhe, tiny bubbles forming on the surface as the chemical reaction escalated. Liam's heart hammered against his ribs. He looked at his wife and child, their faces a mix of confusion and pure terror. He had to think. He had to be smarter than Marcus. He had to find a way to stop it. "It's over, Liam," Marcus said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "The moment you threw that case, you condemned everyone in this neighborhood. And in a few minutes, you'll be the only one left to answer for it. This isn't about chips, Liam. It's about karma. I'm not just taking your fortune. I'm taking your life, your home, and your legacy, and you're going to watch it burn." As Marcus spoke, the wiry man grabbed Chloe and their daughter, pulling them back from the gate, his hand over the girl's mouth. The brutal man stood between Liam and his family, a solid wall of muscle. "The deal, Liam," Marcus said, a manic look in his eyes. "You come back here, you take responsibility for this, and you give yourself up. You can die a hero, or you can die watching them burn." Liam's mind raced, 100 panicked thoughts all at once. He couldn't fight all three of them. He couldn't save his family from this. But then he remembered. He remembered the old Marcus. The Marcus who had a plan for everything. The Marcus who had a weakness. The Marcus who believed his own lies. "You're a fool, Marcus," Liam said, his voice finding a surprising calm. He stepped back from the gate, raising his hands in a gesture of surrender. "You always were. You think you're so smart. You think you've planned for everything, but you forgot the most important part of the deal. The honey wasn't a fuse. It was a trap. And you, Marcus, you walked right into it." Marcus's triumphant smile faltered. His eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "The Widowmaker honey," Liam said, his voice rising, confident. "The bees don't just carry a tranquilizer, Marcus. They also carry a defense mechanism, a virus, one that's harmless to humans, but deadly to any electronic device that comes in contact with it. You just spent the last 5 minutes standing next to a pool of it, with that little toy of a briefcase of yours." He looked pointedly at the device Marcus was still holding. Marcus's face turned from confusion to a cold, creeping horror. "You're lying," he said, his voice trembling. "Am I?" Liam said, a triumphant smirk on his own face. "The hum, Marcus. It wasn't a fuse. It was the briefcase's self-destruct mechanism, a fail-safe I built into it 20 years ago. The briefcase is designed to wipe its own contents, to neutralize its own threat. That's what the hum was, a warning. And the bees? The bees were the first sign. They were running away from the virus. A new kind of panic set in. Marcus looked at the device in his hand, then at the briefcase, now bubbling ominously in the honey pool. He was an electronics expert, a technician. He knew Liam's mind. He knew this was plausible. He had fallen for his own lie. He had played a chess game with a ghost from his past, and he had just lost. "No," Marcus said, his voice a low, terrified growl. "No, you don't get to win." He dropped the device and lunged for the pool, his face a mask of desperation. The brutal man released Chloe and his daughter to join him. The wiry man, seeing his boss lose control, took a hesitant step back, his eyes darting between Liam and the chaos at the pool's edge. This was Liam's moment. The moment for a final act of justice. He didn't run. He ran forward. He tackled the brutal man, sending him sprawling. The wiry man turned to run, but Liam, with a renewed strength born of desperation, grabbed a loose piece of hose from the garden. He swung it like a whip, catching the wiry man in the face with a sharp snap. As the two men were momentarily incapacitated, Liam ran to the pool. He saw Marcus frantically reaching for the briefcase, his hands sinking into the thick golden syrup. "It's over, Marcus," Liam said, his voice hard. "You chose revenge over a clean escape. You chose to ruin my life, and now you're going to be a part of the honey." With a final brutal push, Liam shoved Marcus forward. Marcus, caught off guard, stumbled, his arms flailing, and with a sickening splash, he fell face first into the honey-filled pool. He sputtered, trying to push himself out, his movements hampered by the thick, sweet liquid. The bear, now fully awake and groggy, but still an enormous physical presence, grunted and sat up, confused. He looked at Marcus, his face now a mask of comical bewilderment. And then he looked at Liam. The two men, the brutal and the wiry one, were on their feet, but they were no longer a threat. Their leader was a helpless, honey-covered fool, sputtering in the pool he had created. Chloe, her arms wrapped around their daughter, watched in silent awe. This wasn't the man she knew. This was a ghost from his past, a man of action, of violence, of a dark, complicated life, and yet this was the man who had just saved them. Liam stood over the pool, looking at the man he had betrayed, the man who had come back to haunt him. The humming from the device was gone. The bomb was a lie. The tranquilizer was a lie. Everything had been a grand, terrifying illusion designed to force Liam to betray his family, and he hadn't. He looked at Chloe, at her tear-streaked face. "I'll explain everything," he said, the words a promise. He knew his old life was still a part of him, but the ghosts had been laid to rest. The honey, once a symbol of his ill-gotten fortune, was now the site of his redemption. The final image was of the peaceful pool, with a sputtering, cursing Marcus stuck in the middle, and the little girl pointing at him laughing. "See, Daddy? The funny guy's all sticky." And as Liam looked at the scene, at the life he had almost lost, he knew that the nightmare was over. The honey was just honey. The monster was just a man. And the real prize wasn't in the briefcase at all. It was the family standing on the deck.